In a small village nestled between the rolling hills and dense forests of West Africa lived a young man named Kofi. At 25 years old, Kofi was known for his calm nature and deep respect for the old traditions. The village was a place where every evening families gathered around the large fire in the center of the village square. The fire was not just the source of light and warmth, it was the heart of their community, where stories, wisdom, and secrets were shared under the shimmering stars. But there was something special about this fire. The villagers believed it was alive, carrying the voices of ancestors who had passed on long ago. They said the fire could speak, but only to those who listened with pure hearts and open minds. Kofi, like many others, had grown up hearing these stories, but he had never heard the fire speak himself. He wondered if the voices were real or just tales to keep the children quiet at night. One evening, as the sun set and the village prepared for the usual gathering, a strange feeling settled over Kofi. The air was heavy and still, unlike the usual lively buzz of the village at dusk. Kofi noticed that the fire seemed different too. Its flames flickered with unusual colors, twisting and turning like they were trying to say something. The elders sat quietly, their faces serious and eyes fixed on the fire, but no one spoke. Kofi's heart began to race with a mix of curiosity and fear. He edged closer to the fire, watching the flames carefully. Suddenly he heard it, a soft voice, like a whisper carried by the wind coming from the fire itself. The voice was faint but clear, calling his name. "Kofi, Kofi kid," it said again, with a tone that was both gentle and urgent. Kofi froze. He was not sure if his mind was playing tricks, but the voice was real. The fire was speaking to him. Kofi pulled back and looked around. The villagers were still silent, their faces unreadable. No one else seemed to hear the voice, or if they did, they chose to ignore it. The fire continued to flicker and hiss, and the voice grew stronger, telling a story of a great secret hidden deep in the forest, a secret that could change the fate of the village forever. The voice warned of danger, but also offered hope. Kofi's mind raced as he listened, torn between the fear of what might happen if he acted and the responsibility that the voice had given him. The fire's voice told him to seek the truth, but warned him that the journey would be difficult and full of shadows. It said that the fire had refused to stay silent because the village needed to know what was coming. That night, Kofi lay awake in his hut, the fire's words echoing in his mind. He wondered if he was the only one chosen to hear the voice, or if the fire was trying to speak to all the villagers, but they were too afraid to listen. He thought about the elders and their silence. Was it respect, denial, or fear that kept them from acknowledging the voice? Kofi knew that his life was about to change. The fire's voice had given him a mission, one that would test his courage, wisdom, and heart. As the first light of dawn touched the village, Kofi made a decision. He would follow the voice from the fire, no matter where it led, because some truths were too important to stay hidden in silence. The next morning, Kofi woke up early, his mind still heavy with the voice's message from the fire. The village was calm and peaceful, with the soft sounds of roosters crowing and children playing nearby. But inside Kofi, a storm was growing. He knew he could not ignore the fire's call. The voice had given him a path, a secret that only he seemed able to hear. He dressed quickly, tying his leather bag tightly around his shoulder. Inside, he packed some water, dried meat, and a small knife, essentials for a journey into the unknown. May Ochinish no? Korhe had never left the village alone before, but now he felt a strange courage growing inside him. The fire had chosen him for a reason. As he stepped outside, he saw the elders gathered quietly near the fire pit, their faces solemn and thoughtful. Kofi wanted to tell them about the voice, but something stopped him. Their eyes avoided his, and the silence between them was heavy, like a wall he could not cross. It was clear that the elders did not want to hear about the fire's message. Maybe they had heard it too and chose to keep it secret, or maybe they were afraid of what it meant. Kofi's heart sank, but he knew he could not rely on them. He had to follow the fire's voice alone. He started walking toward the edge of the forest where the trees grew thick and tall, their branches weaving together like a green roof over the path. The forest was a place of mystery and magic in the village stories, home to spirits, ancestors, and creatures both kind and dangerous. The voice from the fire had spoken of a hidden place deep inside this forest where secret was kept safe for generations. Kofi's footsteps were soft but steady as he entered the shade of the trees. The sunlight filtered through the leaves in thin beams, creating patterns on the ground that looked like moving shapes. Every sound seemed louder here. The rustling of leaves, the distant call of birds, and his own breath. He felt eyes watching him, though he could see no one. The forest was alive. As he walked deeper, the path grew narrow and more difficult. Thick roots twisted underfoot, and the air became cooler and damp. Kofi's heart beat faster, but he reminded himself of the fire's warning. The journey would be full of shadows, and he must be brave and respectful. Suddenly, he heard a soft whisper carried on the wind. It was not the voice from the fire, but something else. A voice filled with sorrow and warning. "Turn back," it said, "or the fire's silence will be broken forever." Kofi stopped and looked around, but the forest was still. He wondered if it was just his imagination, but the warning felt real. He whispered back, "I cannot turn back. The village needs to know." Further along, Kofi came to a clearing where an ancient tree stood, its trunk wide and strong with bark marked by time. Around the base of the tree were old symbols carved into the wood, signs of protection and memory. Kofi knelt down and touched the carvings, feeling a connection to the ancestors who had made them. He remembered the fire's story, that the secret he sought was tied to the balance between the living and the spirits. The tree seemed to breathe with a life of its own, and for a moment Kofi heard the faintest echo of the fire's voice. It called him forward, promising truth but warning of danger. Kofi's mind was filled with questions. What was the secret? Why had it been hidden for so long? And why had the fire refused to stay silent now? The weight of responsibility pressed on him, but so did a fierce hope. He was no longer just a young man from the village. He was a bridge between worlds, chosen to listen, to learn, and to tell. With a deep breath, he stood and continued his journey, knowing that every step took him closer to a truth that could change everything he had ever known. As Kofi moved deeper into the forest, the sunlight faded, swallowed by the thick canopy of leaves above. The air grew cooler and heavier, carrying the scent of wet earth and ancient trees. Every step he took was careful, his eyes scanning the shadows for signs of the secret the fire had spoken about. The forest was quiet but not empty. He could feel the presence of something unseen, like the watching eyes of the spirits his people had spoken of since childhood. Not beat faster, not just from fear, but from the growing weight of the responsibility on his shoulders. He was not just on a walk through the woods. He was on a journey to uncover a truth that could save or destroy his village. Suddenly, a soft light appeared ahead, glowing faintly between the trees. Kofi moved toward it slowly, each step echoing softly on the moss-covered ground. The light came from a small fire, but this fire was different from the one in his village. Its flames danced in colors he had never seen, deep blues and shimmering greens that flickered like they held secrets of another world. Around the fire sat an old woman, her skin lined with years and her eyes bright and sharp. She wore a cloak made from animal hides, and in her hands she held a carved wooden staff topped with a glowing stone. Kofi felt a mix of fear and respect. Was she a spirit, a guardian, or something else? The old woman looked up and smiled, her voice soft but strong. I have been waiting for you, Kaisi. Her words surprised him. How did she know his name? The fire spoke to you, did it not? She asked. Kaisi nodded, unsure of what to say. The woman motioned for him to sit by the fire, and as he did, the flame seemed to grow warmer, filling the clearing with a comforting glow. The fire never stays silent when the balance is broken, she exclaimed. It speaks to those who will listen, those who have the courage to face the truth. Kofi listened carefully, hanging on every word. She told him a story of an ancient promise made between the people and the spirits of the forest. Long ago, the village and the forest lived in harmony. The people respected the land and the spirits, and in return, the spirits protected the village from harm. But something had changed. A greed had crept into the hearts of some villagers who had taken more from the forest than they should. The balance was broken, and the fire began to speak out, warning the people to stop before it was too late. The voice from the fire refused to stay silent because the village's future hangs in the balance, the woman said. You have been chosen to restore that balance. Kofi felt a heavy sadness wash over him. The story was not just about the past. It was about his own people and the path they were on. He realized that the silence of the elders was not just fear, but guilt. They knew what was happening, but did not know how to fix it. The old woman's eyes held a gentle challenge. Will you help us, Kofi? Will you be the voice that carries the fire's message to your village? Kofi's heart swelled with both fear and determination. He knew this journey would be dangerous, filled with tests of his spirit and will, but he also knew that to turn away now would mean risking everything he loved. As the fire crackled and the night grew deeper, Kofi made his promise. He would carry the voice from the fire, even if it meant standing alone against those who refused to listen. The old woman reached into her cloak and gave him a small carved amulet, a symbol of protection and a reminder of the sacred trust he had accepted. Remember, she said, the fire's voice is not just a warning. It is a call for healing. Listen carefully, speak wisely, and act with courage. With these words ringing in his ears, Kofi prepared to return to his village, knowing that the hardest part of his journey was still to come. When Kofi returned to the village, the first light of dawn was just touching the rooftops with soft gold. The village looked peaceful, but Kofi knew things had changed, and so had he. The fire's voice was still alive inside him, burning brighter than ever. The amulet from the old woman hung around his neck, a constant reminder of the promise he had made, and the responsibility now resting on his shoulder. He walked toward the central fire pit, where the elders gathered as usual. This time, however, Kofi was no longer the quiet young man who had listened from the shadows. He was the messenger of a truth that could not be ignored. The elders looked at him with a mixture of surprise and caution. Some faces showed fear, others a deep sadness, but none spoke at first. Kofi took a deep breath and began to tell them everything. The voice from the fire, the journey into the forest, the story from the old woman, and the warning about the broken balance between the village and the spirits. As he spoke, the fire's flame seemed to dance higher, casting a warm glow over the circle of faces. Slowly the silence broke, and one elder, a wise woman named Mama Abino, stood up. She was 72 years old, with eyes that held the wisdom of many years and a heart that still beat fiercely for her people. Mama Abina spoke softly but firmly. "The fire has chosen well," she said. "Kofi's courage has brought us a message we have been too afraid to hear. Our silence has been our weakness." The villagers began to murmur, and the elders nodded in agreement. Kofi's words had opened a door that had been closed by fear and denial for too long. The balance between their world and the spirits had been broken by greed and carelessness, by taking more from the land than they had given back. But now, with the fire's voice speaking through Kofi, there was hope for healing and change. Together, the village decided to act. They called for a day of cleansing and renewal where everyone would come together to honor the spirits and promise to respect the land once again. Kofi led the ceremony, his voice steady as he repeated the words taught by the old woman in the forest. The fire roared bright, and the voices of the villagers rose in song and prayer. It was a night of tears and laughter, of memories and new beginning. The fire, once restless and speaking in whispers, now burned calm and strong, a sign that the balance was returning. But Kofi knew the journey was far from over. The voice from the fire had refused to stay silent because it carried a warning, not just of punishment, but of choice. The village could continue on the path of greed and destruction, or it could choose respect and harmony. It was a lesson for all, young and old, that curiosity and courage must be matched with responsibility and care. Kofi's story became a new legend, told around the fire for generations, reminding everyone that sometimes the hardest truth is the one we must face to save ourselves. As years passed, the village flourished once more. The forest grew thick and green, the animals returned, and the spirits seemed at peace. Kofi became a respected leader, not because he was the strongest or the loudest, but because he had listened to the fire, to the voices of the past, and to the call of his own heart. The fire's voice had taught him that silence is not always peace, and speaking the truth is not all, but in that truth lays the power to heal, to change, and to live in harmony with the world around us. And so the voice from the fire lived on, refusing to stay silent, reminding all who would listen that every fire carries a story, every story carries a lesson, and every lesson carries the hope of a better tomorrow.